Greetings, lords and ladies. So, Surfing Violinists podcast is on location this week at Mises Institute in Auburn, near Auburn, Alabama. Got Murray Rothbard behind me here. And then over there is a bust of Ludwig von Mises, who the Institute's named about. Today's essay is going to be about my experience this week. And for those of you who don't know as much about my family history, my family past, we'll go into a little bit about that, talking about my grandfather. He was a writer, journalist, press secretary, big into PR, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to dive in. I'm getting started a little bit early because we got some classes coming up. It's the last day of the university. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in. So those of you catching it midstream are going to be like, well, probably like normal. What is Ford talking about? So let's go for it. My grandfather was a press secretary for John Sparkman, the longest-serving U.S. senator from Alabama. As I grew up, I never knew much about my grandfather's politics. He was retired by the time I was on the scene, but early morning breakfasts were dominated by high-spirited speeches at the table as he read the paper. I was not interested in politics as a kid. I was a Christian first and foremost. And I understood that to mean that my kingdom was not of this world. It took me 30 years to understand the implications behind Thomas Jefferson's words about the need for a wall of separation between church and state. I'd always assumed that Jefferson was interested in protecting the state from the church, which he was. But after entering adult life, I began to recognize Jefferson's warning as an idealistic distrust of the parasitic influence of politics. The intrigue, gossip, and rhetorical art that so intrigued my grandfather as a journalist and speechwriter has always alienated me. It was not until I was knee-deep in the innards of adult life in the church, the school system, non-governmental charities, small business, and even the tech startup world that I recognized a common theme. I'm a pretty annoying person to have around if you are a true believer in any particular area. I ask child questions by default, not because I'm trying to be an asshole, but because I want to understand the whole picture. How do we get here? How did we get here in this company or this organization? Where are we going? Why are we going there in particular? Does this specific activity tie into the overall goal? Perhaps I should have been an engineer, but for whatever reason I have drifted through life as a kind of anomalous ideological systems analyst. Thorn in the side to anyone naive enough to mistake my enthusiasm for blind faith. Perhaps it is no coincidence that my first name is Thomas, because though I was a true believing Christian for all of my formative years, my skepticism has remained intact, and a doubting Thomas I remain. I found that every single institution had a sentimental, superficial, and short-sighted notion of their own stated mission. The mission statement was just another perfunctory item in a checklist, as if they had taken a few cumulative hours during commercial breaks to sketch out their 50-year plan, and after having a guy like my grandfather polish the copy a bit, shelved it and never looked back. They had a reason for being, problem solved, now let's do this thing. In every case, however, I noticed that whatever the stated objective was, whether it was in a business or school system, church, whatever the stated objective was, the real motivation was the same: self-interested careerism and chronic pain-relieving consumerism. Christian or atheist, Muslim or Hindu, teacher or businessman, pastor or worship leader, bartender or journalist, I'd found that we are all just a bunch of intellectually lazy, impetuous, reactionary, greedy, and envious pricks. We, not some other system out there, we. And we seem to be waiting for something to happen as we scour the landscape for a scapegoat. Any unsuspecting dupe will do, on whom we can pin all the blame for the seemingly incongruous existential dread powering our neuroses. And now you're starting to see why I don't get along with management. A few minutes ago, you were like, oh, this guy's okay, a bit annoying and self-important, but I don't see why he says he's a thorn in the side. Oh, okay. And here's where the collective AI prompts you to paste in the Huxleyan Hypnopedia phrase, I bet he's fun at parties, as if that were your own original thought and not a programmed response from the zeitgeist to make sure you remain plugged into Brave New World. When I was young, we would say the same thing about my grandfather. The piping hot, fresh Ford rant, brought to you from the genetic nature and breakfast table nurture of my grandfather, Grover Cecil Smith. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, I have a link to the notes, and so this link will be there. It's
a link where you can read a post about my grandfather's political savvy and social life. And reading it actually made me a bit nostalgic. I mean, my grandfather was kind of a grumpy old man, and we busted his chops about it. But, it's easy. I guess they say absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? You start to realize that there's more to a person when they're not around, and you miss them. And, so it's a very good portrait of my grandfather there in that link. If you're watching on Twitch, won't actually have the link. Good morning, Hush. Good morning, Henry. But on, I think, Facebook and YouTube, the link is there to today's essay. I'm talking a little bit about my grandfather and his history as a writer. So when I was young, my grandfather would often attend conferences, mostly about writing, politics, and public relations. In fact, that link is from the Public Relations Council of Alabama, in which they christened the name of their Lifetime Achievement Award in my grandfather's honor. It just so happens that I'm at a conference this week, and it just so happens that it's in Alabama, Mises University in Auburn, Alabama. As a kid, I didn't get the whole conference thing. I'm weird in multiple ways, but one of the weirdest is that I hate big concerts and events. I hate crowds. I hate the overhyping of everything. Ironically, I hosted a couple Comic Cons in India, so maybe I'm just a narcissist and hate being in the audience. I don't know. I went to these Christian conferences and school conferences when I was younger, and I just didn't get it. I hated them. In 2010, a friend named Alan Branch put on a tech conference called LessConf for coders, web designers, and creative people in tech. The idea being a focus on a no-nonsense, clean approach to doing business at the speed of the internet. I did the videos for the conference, and I finally understood why my grandfather did these things. I got to interview guys like Jason Fried, founder of Basecamp, and Chris Wanstroth, founder of GitHub, and I was inspired. These were people who were changing technological logistics at a startup level that would go on to have ripple effects to the entire infrastructure of big tech and, by extension, the world. I really have to hand it to Alan and his business partner for giving me that chance, because it changed the course of my life, and because I was editing a multi-camera shoot of these conference talks rather than having a live switcher, and I had to edit it on this cumbersome setup with my laptop computer that ended up being a real thorn in my side. By the time I was uploading these conference talks to the internet, I pretty much had each talk memorized, and it was great. I was getting paid to learn and work at the same time, and these talks just infected me. I didn't want to do business as usual. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Alan's business partner, then going by the name of Steve, was the first person who, after agreeing to pay me for my video work services, looked me straight in the eye after I said how thankful I was for the opportunity to do the work, to actually do some video editing for pay. Looked at me and said, "You're good at it." It took me almost 10 years to believe that. That was 2010, almost 10 years ago, and I've never felt as invigorated and imbued with purpose until this week. Thursday night, I got to hear Lou Rockwell, founder of the Mises Institute, talk about the founding of the Mises Institute, a center for the study of Austrian economics and free market ideas. And for the first time since I was in that room with Alan, Steph, David Heinemeier Hansen, Jason Fried, Chris Wanstroth, and my team of video guys, Jason, Lute, and Thomas, I felt like maybe we didn't live in the Matrix. Maybe we don't live in the Matrix. Like maybe there's a way out of the Byzantine labyrinth of existential dread that seems to make modern life seem bleaker than it is. The other night, Lou talked about Murray Rothbard, that's the figure behind me over here, and Ludwig von Mises, figure back there, sharing personal stories of personal interactions with the two most important figures of Austrian economics in the 20th century. I finally found another little nook in which people's ideas, scientific and cultural aspirations aligned with their work ethic and daily life. I felt challenged on Monday night when Judge Andrew Napolitano went full Jeffersonian on us and gave a truly stirring speech on natural rights and the genius of the Declaration of Independence, and how in our fixation on the Constitution and our enshrinement of the Federalists, Americans took a detour from true individual self-determination with intrinsic human rights, regardless of religion, race, creed, or nation. This high federalist, centralized power in a Byzantine structure of quote-unquote checks and balances instituted slavery as a necessary compromise, cementing it as a matter of course for another 70 years. Meanwhile, in old world monarchical England, a cis-white Anglo-Saxon male Protestant put an end to the slave trade under tyranny while in a monarchical system 50 years before America. Granted, there's way more to it than that, and one day I will dive into the nuances of this disgusting but detailed tangle of human history that perhaps I need to remind everyone still persists in pockets around the world to this day, largely and thanks to the all-powerful state. But it was refreshing to sit in a room in which a man almost twice my age was more radical in his personal liberty stance than me. I'm the craziest person in the room. At the beginning of the week, Jeff Deist, Mises U president, congratulated the students, especially the young ones, for taking a week out of their summer to dive into the study of human freedom and economic nuance, and that doing so is and I quote, coming to Mises U is a refutation of sorts, however small, of this sort of anti-intellectual tenor of our age we find ourselves in. If there's one thing that the Mises Institute has stood for over the years, it's the idea that intelligent lay people can actually do deep intellectual work, and that even intelligent young lay people can actually read books, and difficult books at that. He went on to use a word that is fitting for Surfing Violinist podcast listeners. Intellectual pursuits are not just the provinces of these alchemists or these mysterious academics, but they're pursuits that belong to all of us if we choose to. He challenged Mises U attendees to, quote, become inveterate and prolific readers. There's nothing you can do that will separate you from your peers more readily than being good, solid, consistent, steady readers of real stuff. It's 4 good words there. Good, solid, consistent, steady. I think it's really kind of the key to getting out of some of the messes we find ourselves in. So I took the first step in that challenge with a whole violin gigs pay worth purchase of books. Here's one of them, not the first place you want to start in your Austrian economics study, but it's required reading, Human Action, written by the man himself, Ludwig von Mises. Mises was a Jewish Austro-Hungarian born in 1881 in present-day Ukraine. He fought on the side of what would become Germany in World War I, a contribution, of course, forgotten by the idiocy of collectivism, which would have executed him less than a half-century later when the Nazis took power. A Jew fighting on the front lines in one of the worst wars in history, World War I, had to flee to America so he wasn't put in a concentration camp. Of course, rather than engaging in quick-fix demagoguery masquerading as egalitarianism, talking about getting his feelings hurt by people in America making fun of his accent, Mises was made of sterner stuff and wrote this, one of the greatest compendiums of human liberty ever penned. I'll read this paragraph from chapter 6, Uncertainty, as it gets at this whole Surfing Violinist project, just a bit. Some philosophers are prepared to explode the notions of man's will as an illusion and self-deception because man must unwittingly behave according to the inevitable laws of causality. They may be right or wrong from the point of view of the prime mover or the cause itself. However, from the human point of view, action is the ultimate thing. We do not assert that man is quote-unquote free in choosing and acting. We merely establish the fact that he chooses and acts, and that we are at a loss to use the methods of the natural sciences for answering the question why he acts this way and not otherwise. A lot of what human action is talking about is that we try to make these prescriptive notions of human behavior, and this is why we have prohibitions. You can't do drugs, can't drink, blah, blah, blah. But then we make laws about those things or establish cultural norms, and everyone still does them. They just bury them underground, and that creates a black market. Mises wasn't interested in ethics as such. He was interested in studying human action and why people do what they do, because he saw the worst of what humans could do in World War I, and he had to get out before World War II happened as a Jew. And that's what this Surfing Violinist project's all about. It's about human action. It's about taking small steps, like sustainable. We talk about sustainability at a macro level in terms of the environment, but we're talking about sustainability in the long term for the individual, making decisions that are actually going to amount to something over time, not overnight. It is unfair to try to reduce this whole week to a blurb or a favorite talk, because I will be unpacking the geyser of info I've received this week over the course of the next year. But there's one talk for our purposes I do want to mention. Mark Thornton delivered a talk on the opioid crisis, and I'm convinced now more than ever that global fractional reserve, fixed low interest rate, fiat currency-backed banking is truly the cause of this malaise. That's my hot take. Our high time preference addicted society that has for over a century demanded instant gratification and refused to sit in failure and learn from our mistakes has created a xenomorph alien monster of consumption that grinds the unstable individual to powder. Whether it comes in the form of white men shooting up schools or overdosing on legal prescription drugs in America, Chinese men knifing up... Well, I worded that wrong. Chinese men knifing up, killing spree, rampage knifings in China, where limited access to guns creates a market for old-fashioned forms of mass murder. Or maybe it comes in the form of Japanese students suiciding in a forest in Japan. Or Indian businessmen throwing themselves off the top floor of a mall I frequented while in Noida, India. Or my dad popping a bottle full of Xanax and trying to suicide by cop 2 years ago while I had to grab his hand to keep him from grabbing the knife to finish the job. Or the case of a transgender female who died with the name Steph when she committed suicide in my home state of Florida. That same Steph was my buddy Alan's business partner who gave me that compliment back in 2010 at LessConf. Steph transitioned while I was in India, and I returned to work with her and Alan at their company making videos. Our last personal interaction sucked. She had taken a very liberal turn, and I had taken a very disillusioned Trump-tard turn. We got into a bad argument. I apologize, but we never really had another heart-to-heart after that. She committed suicide not long after in complications due to a personal family matter. I wish I would have been able to say something as meaningful to Steph as she had said to me almost 10 years ago, helping me start my video career. This self-destructive crisis of irrational death, suicide, overdose, rampage killing, terrorism is a vestigial remnant of a time gone by, and I do believe that our notions of value and addiction to instantaneous gratification at the financial... I'm sorry, I worded that totally wrong. I must read that sentence again. What was I trying to say? I do believe that our notions of value and addiction to instantaneous gratification at the financial level. Okay, let's say it again. This self-destructive crisis of irrational death, suicide, overdose, rampage killings, terrorism is a vestigial remnant of a time gone by, and I do believe that our notions of value and addiction to instantaneous gratification at the financial level truly have seismic implications that subsidize us into a kind of passive conformity to self-actualizations that only metastasize the worst parts of human nature. I truly believe the messages of personal freedom, human action, deferred satisfaction, long-term responsibility, and a prioritization of real, lasting legacy value are golden ideas that can help those of us trapped in a cloud of existential dread to see a bigger picture and help build a better world, not just of finance and work, but a world of better me's, of better individuals. I'm thankful to the Mises Institute for helping me find a constructive way forward, and I'm excited to do like Jeff said, Jeff Deist, with the reading, but to apply that to my whole life, to be good, solid, consistent, and steady. We need to take our time, quit depending on demagoguery and politics as such, and start with the stuff closest to us that we can fix, as JPP likes to say. God knows I've got my work cut out for me in my life. So do it for Steph, do it for my dad, who is still alive, thank God. Do it for those kids hanging in that forest in Japan. Do it for Ravindra Honda, the man who jumped off that 6th floor in Noida Center Stage Mall back in 2012. Act as humans, quit waiting on God, government, or gurus, but do so with humility and circumspection. We ain't going to get out of this mess overnight. So that's pretty much it for my thoughts this week. I've been really inspired by this whole experience. About to hear myself talk. So that's pretty much it for my thoughts this week. Can I mute this? Sorry. Hold on 1 second. Just trying to see if anybody else commented on here. Arjun says Trump at least bringing employment. Yeah. Yeah. You know, there's a lot. I think again, it's been kind of encouraging to be one of the younger guys here in terms of the people speaking. I'm not speaking, but listening to people older than me being more idealistic than me and more principled in a sense, like willing to hold out hope for, not compromising with their own viewpoints politically or socially or culturally or morally, and not like, I mean, a lot of them just don't vote because they can't find any candidate that really aligns with their personal views. As far as the next election, it's kind of cool. So Dave Smith, he's a comedian. He's got his own podcast, Part of the Problem. He was here yesterday, interviewed Jeff Dice, the president of Mises U. And there's so many. One of the parts of the intro of our podcast is a quote from Newsroom. The one quote from Newsroom I like. I am more than one thing. A black gay Republican who said that because a progressive was basically trying to pigeonhole him and say, you're a gay man, that's your defining attribute. And this man's like, no, I'm more than that. I have multiple interests. I have multiple passions. I have multiple ideals, not just interests. And people keep trying to pigeonhole like Mises and say, because of some connection in the past or some statement taken out of context that it's a white nationalist group. Again, I'm flanked by two Jews back here. I mean, people that call this a white nationalist group, I just want to be like, are you anti-Semitic? Like, what's your deal here? Mises fled the Nazis. Okay, we are not pro-Nazi. I'm not pro-Nazi. None of the people I've heard speak this week are pro-Nazi. And so Dave Smith and Jeff were discussing this, and it was just refreshing to hear coming out of the mouth of a comedian, like actual interesting political ideas, not just this paint by the numbers, milk with toast, trying to hit some market saturation at the YouTube or late night talk show host level, Kirti Nayak says, we need to find balance between Republican and Democratic. Not sure it's even possible. I don't honestly think a balance is good. I think what we need to find is a free market politics in which multiple ideas are allowed to be on the table, not just two. We don't live in a binary world. We're all genetically unique. And, so even when people talk ethnically or racially or linguistically, none of these things are diverse enough to get at what we really are. We're all genetically unique. So how are we going to have a system with two sides that's ever going to be rigorous or balanced enough to get at everything? And so you need individual choice to be able to mediate that. Democratic politics has failed in that regard, and populism is taking over. That's why, people are tired of being told, "Oh, you're gonna call me and whatever. I'm just gonna vote for who I want." Luke, how you doing, man? Unfortunately, I got to read this before they go off the screen. I think you and Camus were ruminating on the same stuff, Ford. He was, the world is incredibly alienating. This lecture has been kind of a guiding light through all this. Okay, cool. Thanks. I'll check that one out. I'll check that one out when I get the chance. It's interesting. I do talk a lot about existential dread. I really haven't read much about from Camus or Sartre. I think I've read a little bit, but I think there's something that technology tends to alienate us as it makes us more independent from, like, work with your hands, and the camaraderie of the disutility of labor. Like, they're not great things, but at the same time, they do kind of bring you back down to earth. And I think we do all feel very disjointed in this techno-utopia. And so we need something to balance. That's where we need a balance. We need a balance of more tech, but also more return to simpler things. Like, a factory system doesn't work for everything. So we need to balance and be almost like improvisationally creative in the way that we address modern society, instead of this sort of it's a Brave New World dystopia where, again, people at the margins are just crushed, whatever, racially, ethnically, politically. There's just, people are depressed. People are looking for a relief from the pain, whether it come in the form of opioids or pastimes, and I think a lot of, like, the political zealotry, the political passion comes from people searching for a place, you know. Yes, Arjun, you're right. Why American politics sounds so much like India? Trump is very much Modi. Well, Modi really set the stage globally. Like when Modi happened, that happened before Brexit, and Brexit happened before Trump. And everyone like in the center said, oh, Modi, Brexit, Trump. They're still saying, Trump. They're still saying, Modi. Like, they can't even recognize reality when it happens. The way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow a very lively debate within that spectrum. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, actually. Very, very good way of putting that. Because I think if you can keep people arguing over minutia, then they don't have a bigger enemy to fight. You know, so if you can, as a demagogue, leverage communal tension or ideological tension. Oh, Chomsky said that. That was a Chomsky quote? That's fantastic. That's like some Tao Te Ching level crap right there. That's good. But yeah, I mean, if you can leverage that sort of tension within an in-group, keep them fighting amongst themselves. There's that little proverb. It's hard to find who said it first, if it's a Bedouin proverb or an African tribal proverb, but it goes something along the lines of, I and my village against the world, I and my clan against the village, I and my family against the clan, I and my brother against the family, I against my brother. And you know, that's the kind of thing that you see happening with tribalism. You know, it's not like capital invented competition, okay? And tribalist competition is something all over the world. It was true not just of America or India or Australia. White people were tribes too. I mean, just go look at the Irish versus England. There was, or look at all the different, look at all the War of the Roses, all that stuff in England. Like, tribalism is a human thing. It wasn't like unique to India, Australia, Africa, and North America. We're all tribalists in heart, and that tribalistic mentality is the way that you know, if you appeal to those divisions, then you can make a political career out of it. I like to see small grassroots farming in congregation with other small farming and economic to support them, some economic theory or something like that. Yeah, I saw a little post the other day. It shows how on less than a half acre of land you can have this little homestead, kind of like tiny home with a garden that, I mean, you won't be self-sufficient just from the fruit of the garden, but you will have you know, something to offset. So you won't be totally dependent on outside sources, which is where we're at now. Everything is dependent on this industrialized way of doing food production and food distribution. So I mean, we do have to find a better way of working that. And honestly, like, ironically, like the hipster food movement and the hipster beer movement are two signs, I think, of good things to come. We need to apply those same sort of mentalities, this trying to make things smaller. Instead of trying to become the biggest company in the world, you have these local restaurants that just nail it. You know, they're just, their whole goal is just the focus on their own farm to table product, you know. This much more sustainable way of doing business at a small scale, that not everything has to be this gigantic globo corporate thing. So we do need a more like multi-layered approach of a lot of these things. Yeah, so I think there's some truth there. Gyra says, to ward off weather or dependence, modern processed food manufacturing and delivery culture. Yes, exactly. And that's my same issue with like YouTube and what it's become, how it's become consolidated. And I'm sorry, guys, but there's just nothing in capitalism intrinsically that is about consolidation. It's nothing. Okay, that's a human thing that was applied to capitalism that already happened before. I mean, it's just the ideology of empire. It's taking the tribe, and that's how Britain conquered India. That's how Britain conquered India, was basically arbitrating disputes between tribes, and then getting like, oh, you know, I mean, they didn't conquer them with weapons of war primarily. It was these economic weapons. I mean, it was happening in a capital era, but that diplomatic approach, really self-interested, imperial approach of consolidation and centralization, that's not the impulse of capital. That's the impulse of human beings. Once a person has the basically, I said this in another thing a long time ago. The tribe is just a stillborn empire. It's just an empire that hasn't figured out how to technologically fulfill its goals of world domination. That's it. Because once you get to a critical mass of, a couple hundred people, all of a sudden everyone's arguing about everything. It's like, oh, I wanted that tent to be yellow. I wanted that tent to be purple. And it's like, okay, we're going to become the purple tent people. You're going to become the yellow tent people. I mean, that's just human nature. If you've ever tried to do like any sort of get people together around a common cause, like it fractures at a certain point. And so that's what Mises is saying with human action is this is just observational fact. Human beings want to do their own thing. We're all unique. We're not like a collection of 8 races. We're a collection of 7 billion individual genetically unique people who aren't going to agree on everything ever. So why are you trying to force us into these straitjacket things? What you do when you get that is this demagoguery that ends up using other groups as scapegoats to make the conformity possible. I mean, empire still kills people, more so than capital does. And Chomsky, a left libertarian. I don't know. I mean, would you really call him a libertarian? I feel like he is more of a, he's getting at it that I would say the better side of Marx, just about the suffering of the individual at the bottom of society. But I don't know if I'd call him a libertarian. In a sense, I guess Marx, in some ways, appeals to that. But he's got these very pastoral notions of the disutility of labor. It's like, dude, you need to get out of writing that book and go work in the field for a while. Let's see how much you think it's engenders love of your fellow man when you're in the shit. Neoliberal. Oh man, I can't actually see this. Neoliberal something. Instead of citizens, it produces consumers. Instead of communities, it produces shopping malls. I do. I think that is, again, like an oversimplification of what's actually going on. Yeah, there's so many things at play there. Are you blaming capital? Are you blaming the human's will to consolidate power? Again, that predates technology. That predates capital. This whole notion that, again, like Marx's whole critique is like, oh, we've seen capitalism in work for less than a century. Let's just go ahead and throw this. Let's overthrow. I mean, we gave empire like 5,000 years, and in a century we're supposed to just like have capital, all the problems of capitalism figured out in a century. Come on. I mean, again, it's this kind of quick fix. Marx's appeal to envy was just pure demagoguery. I mean, he was just doing the same thing that every other powermonger does. In some, neoliberalism is the immediate and foremost enemy of genuine participatory democracy. Democracy is a lost cause. Populism has beat it. It's beat it. All the Democrats think that, oh, everyone thinks the same, and that this is just stupid. This is stupid thought. No, 1 billion people are not going to think the same. And like the election of Modi, the election of Trump, Brexit has proven that the democratic experiment has failed. The only democracy that matters is the free market, because you can actually hold your okay. So back in the days, you had something called noblesse oblige. It's the obligation of the noble, right? So the noble is leading the people. But what separated that form of Magna Carta directed civilization? What made that possible was this whole idea that the leader was servant. And that's what capitalism is. It's leaders as servants who aren't holding you at gunpoint or knife point, making you give your first fruits in a feudal system. No, they're letting you decide and offer critical feedback. If you boycott them, if you quit paying them, then they go out of business and someone else can replace them. But people act like I just can't help it. I have to watch Netflix. I just can't help it. I have to use Facebook and Google. Really, you have to? Again, it's just this passive, like subsidized, entitled attitude that luxuries are a right and are forced upon us. So no, I don't agree with Chomsky on that at all. Democracy's failed. The true democracy is when you actually can hold the person that's serving you accountable for their actions. In the last 100 years, America's been involved in a constant warfare state. We've not been at war like, 4 years in that whole time. One war after another. And every time we fail, every time it fails, everyone just is like, death and taxes. Those are the two things you can count on. Why? Why is that written? Is that natural law, really? Taxes and death in war? Using the blood of young people to subsidize your imperial aims? Really? No. I think we have to find free market solutions to these things where we're actually holding ourselves accountable as entrepreneurs, businessmen, where we're not trying to make these gigantic empires of tech, and that's the very difficult thing. It's near impossible, but the state has shown it is impossible for the state to ever do that right, because they will never be held accountable. They will always blame some scapegoat. Arjun says there is something very depressing about technology like they show in Black Mirror. Yeah, I don't know. Black Mirror, I just feel like it's just watered down Philip K. Dick. It's just, you want to talk about capitalism going amok. It's that stupid show. I don't like Charlie Brooker. I just don't like his whole worldview. It's weak. Just go back and read PKD. Go back and read Aldous Huxley. Go back and read Orwell. Orwell was a socialist and had a way better perspective on these things than Charlie Brooker. He's just a hypocritical, self-important douchebag. Sitting there talking about technology being just alienating us and everything. Okay, then quit using it. Then why are you making a show on Netflix, dude? Shut up. You don't believe any of this. All these people claiming to be Luddites while they utilize this technology to make a career. I'm sorry. I have no patience for those kind of people. I'm a very pro-market believer. I agree with you in that regard. I think it is a very deep human system, but free markets are tweaked either by the government or by big corps. I agree, but I don't think that we're into this experiment 100 years in the current technological system we find ourselves. So to just throw our hands up and say, oh, well, just let Hillary and Trump figure it out. That's just stupid to me. Again, that's human passion. What Ludwig von Mises advocated was human action, that we as lay people can actually say something about it, can actually do something about it at the grassroots level, as opposed to waiting around for some god guru or government to save our asses. Sunkenil says, no matter how pure form a free market system starts, the human instinct is to cut corners when you have a bit of advantage. But again, that happens in every system that's ever existed. You think that what's his name who did the Taj Mahal didn't do that? You think that Attila the Hun didn't do that? You think Alexander the Great didn't do that? You think Lyndon B. Johnson didn't do that? You think Modi hasn't done that? Every single politician has done that, but we just kind of it's just the way it is. So a guy told me the other day, he works for the U.S. military. They started a project 20 years ago, but because of the outmoded infrastructure and institutionalism of the government and the bureaucracy and all the hands you have to shake and all the the paperwork you have to do, they have known for years that this project they started, they didn't have access to the technology we have now, so they made wrong assumptions about where the flow of tech was going to go. But nobody had the balls to step up and say, this isn't going to work. Or if they did, they just got canned. Because people are getting paid whether it worked or not. That's the point. 20 years they wasted, I don't know the number, but we're talking tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars of 10,000 people's time. And when they finally got the product to market after 20 years, they had to scrap the whole thing. No upside. The challenge is to manage the trade-off and optimize the system to take care of the inflection points. Yes, absolutely. I agree. Gyro says, I remember one of your posts. I don't know if it was a YouTube video or Twitter feed. You posted a photo showing different aspects of ideologies, one being extreme right, another being extreme left. Yeah, I do want to go back and revisit that. That was specifically in reference to cross-cultural communication. But I think it still holds. I think it's at least a valuable metaphor or heuristic, picture to kind of show how we are so naive when we get into a new cultural environment, we just see all the good of it. And we're like, oh yeah, it's like, me as an American going to India, I'm like, oh, look at the food, listen to the music, this is great. And, maybe you as an Indian coming to America and be like, oh, wow, the roads are really clean, I can drive really fast, and, it's, but then once you're there, you hit a certain critical mass where you start to notice everything. And this is why there is no single solution to these things. Why capitalism is just a tool. We cannot look at capitalism as the be-all, end-all cause to fix all of the problem. It is a tool. Institutions are a tool. I'm not saying we just throw out everything that we've learned from history. I'm not saying that the Magna Carta was a bad step in the history of legal thought. But I am saying that we need to be more careful when we look at things in quadrants. BLF just subscribed. Thank you so much for the subscription, BLF. Good to have you. We need to have a more free market approach to our ideals. Orange Moose just subscribed. Thank you for the subscription. I have a feeling we have a gifting spree here. Thank you. Good, sir. Fuji Glip Glops just subscribed. Thank you. Gyro says, and there were 2 more types of ideologies that I can't remember, and you said is, which I'm a big supporter of that. We need a balance between all this, so we have to keep things in equilibrium. Smeasel, thank you for the subscription. Okay, so basically it's a chart with 4 quadrants. It's Mr. John, thank you. 4 quadrants, you've got proximity, cultural proximity, and then enthusiasm is basically the 4 quadrant split. So are you have a positive reaction to it or a negative reaction to it? So I'm losing it looks like I'm losing my power here, my signal strength. Let me know if it's getting real choppy. So I think I'll have to talk about that in detail because I'll have to look at the chart. But the basic idea being, you've got people who are true believers and they're close to proximity, so they're born into the culture. So like me, I was born as a American evangelical Christian, and I wasn't real patriotic. I wasn't real pro-American. I was just Jesus, just Christian, 100% through and through. That was my ideology, that was my identity, that was my community, that was everything. I was a one-note human being. And but I started playing violin, I started surfing, I started doing these other things that didn't necessarily fit the card-carrying member. And then I did some traveling, and that just kind of, the more I did all that stuff, it forced me from that one quadrant where I was close to the culture, enthusiastic about the culture, into this other one where I was like, I'm starting to see some real problems with my home culture and my way of looking at things. And so it made me pretty cynical. And then I went, the other one is, so you leave from that quadrant to this other quadrant where it's someplace far away from you where you have no cultural experience of it. It might be right next door geographically, but it's totally the other side of the world ideologically. So a capitalist becomes a communist, a Christian becomes an atheist, a Protestant becomes a Roman Catholic, a Hindu becomes an atheist, or whatever. Maybe someone converts to another denomination or something like that, or another sect. So it doesn't have to be a geographical proximity change, but it is an ideological, cultural, philosophical, sociological change. And so you go over to that and you're just like, everything is great. All you see is just the road, all you do is smell the roses. And it's just like, oh, this is wonderful. There's this honeymoon phase. And then slowly but surely you start to realize, wait a minute, this is not as great as I thought it was. And then all you can see is all the terrible things. Now, people don't necessarily follow that pattern. There are you can think of Christian missionaries going to India or Africa or whatever, or even not just Christian missionaries. Darwin was guilty of this when he saw, I think, the French Polynesians or someone in Pacific Islands. He was dismissive. He didn't even think they were human beings. Okay, we don't talk about that kind of racism because only kind of racism is just religious racism. But no, Darwin was like that, and he looked at these people and said, oh well, they're not even going to be able to have a civilization because they're not even human. And he's like, those dumb Christians going over there trying to teach them to read, they don't even have a language. And then 20 years later, it's like, oh crap, they've learned how to read. And again, we get into that sort of an anonymous cheerer. Thank you for the 1,000 bits. Thank you very much. But yeah, I'm not saying necessarily, this is really, again, this is a really like, it's painstaking trying to figure out the nuance of this. Because when you talk about cultural intervention, like whether it be a missionary or economic involvement or whatever, like there are ways you do damage. I feel like you need a much, it's like in Star Trek they talked about it like the prime directive. Like how do you introduce new technologies to these old cultures that don't have warp drive? Like how do you intervene without like messing up their whole frame of viewing the world and losing their rich culture? And there is, I really do believe that. I'm pseudo multicultural in that sense, like that I think we do have different things to bring to the table. And so I don't want to just see everyone look the same, you know? I don't want everyone being white. I don't want everyone wearing the same clothes. Like, I want people to exercise the choice to do what they want to do, if they want to do it. And it's truly intrinsic and not some, you know, ill-fitting suit, you know, something that just doesn't fit them. Like, I want to see some of these great things preserved. I'm conservative in that sense. I do want to see this, or, you know, a conservative might not even be the word. I'm almost more like a conservationist, you know, a cultural conservationist, an ideological conservationist. Like if there are things that we can keep from the past that aren't killing people and, you know, making things miserable, or if there's some way we can get the nastiness out of that culture, but you really need an insider involved in that process, and you don't want to force it from outside. Anyways, all that to say, Darwin had this very low view of these other cultures, saying, oh, well, you know, these just tribal people, like they're not even people. And so him as an outsider, he couldn't see any good in the target culture. All he saw them was, oh, they're all animals, you know. And that's the typical, you know, crusading, Eurocentric white view of other societies. But it's not just white. I mean, let's be real. That kind of thing happens elsewhere too. Fords need to grow mutton chops. I need to grow mutton chops, you think? Maybe that is the next step. I'm sorry, I missed a couple of those things. I was in the middle of my rant. So I do need to pull that chart out. That was a good memory there. Thank you for that one. I've been meaning to do something about that. Heidel Stresskog says, you are sounding racist with your ideas. No, I'm quoting Charles Darwin. You've ever heard of him? He's the racist, idiot. What? Like, don't jump in the middle of the conversation and assume that I'm saying my own ideas. What are you talking about? Yeah, go back and read The Origin of the Species, or The Struggle for Favored Races. Yeah, that was Charles Darwin that said it, not some white crusading Christian imperialist. Like, come on, dude. Like, oh, all atheists are racist then. Like, come on. Like, be a little more nuanced in your criticism, please. Arjun says, many Indians think America is perfect. They think it's utopian America. And many Americans think that crap. I mean, it's not. It's not a utopia. There's a lot of dystopic elements. We've got to figure out how to fix. Hello, Govind Kumar Raj. Thank you for still loving me. I'm losing a lot of Indian subscribers. Every day it goes down by 20 or 30, which is fine. I don't want people being here thinking that I'm still doing the videos that made this channel possible or popular. So I do thank you, those of you who are still here and, willing to talk some ideas about philosophy, politics, culture, economics. Okay, that's fine. You're a moron. You're always spewing garbage. Let all follow someone else's words. Ford, you failed. That's fine. See ya. You can unsubscribe. It's no big deal. I mean, nobody's forcing you to be here. That's the beauty of the free market. See, if we lived in a totalitarian system, I would be forcing you to be excommunicated or whatever. Like, yeah, I'm the racist. Sure. Okay, idiot. Well, the channel's name is Surfing Violinist and there's no violin. Nah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I've been guilty of that. Calmly dismantles racist. Yeah, I don't calmly do too much. This is true. You got to work on that. Again, getting back to what Jeff was saying, having a much more those 4 words that he said. I'll kind of end with this. I got to get going here. This phone's about to die. Yes, you're right. Calling people an idiot is not constructive either. So, calling people racist is not constructive, but neither is calling people an idiot. So he said the way that Jeff put it was we need to have good, solid, consistent, and steady. So yes, it was not good to call you an idiot. We just need to quit having this knee-jerk way of trying to get to the next step, of trying to fix the things that we've got. I'm an emotional snowflake. Okay. No, you're right. I am guilty of that too often. I'm sure you're not at all, though. You should start covering Indian songs with violin to get some subs. I'm just not my goal right now. So, but yeah, good, solid, consistent, and steady. Instead of having this overnight search for virality, I mean, that kind of gets what I'm saying here. I'm not really trying to have an overnight search for reality. I'm the surfing violinist. The whole concept is about finding cross pollinations at intersections of culture, or maybe, in cultures that never really intersect, never really overlap, and how can we learn from one another or use an insight gained in one field of human endeavor or human action and apply it to some other one. And I think we can do that slowly but surely. You got to write a book. I am. Every time I've written it, it's just, it is just too Ford ranty. I mean, in that sense, Heidel's Stresskog is right. Like, it doesn't really land. I go back and read it, and it's just, I don't know. It's just too all over the place. It's like a Ford rant, and it's, I don't really feel like it's real constructive in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. No, I'm not grateful for you giving me the view. If you disagree with me, you can go somewhere else. It's fine. Nobody's forcing you to be here again. Like, I will grant that my tone, again, it doesn't work. We need to have a more long-term view of things. And I tend to be a hothead, and I don't think it's very constructive in the long term. So I think writing a book would be a good thing. I've been trying to, but again, it's just kind of in this weird spot. Every time I go and read it, I just don't feel like it's communicating what I'm trying to get at. And I really, in a way, I want it to be a document of my life so far and some hopefully pitfalls to avoid that I still have fallen for. I mean, just being like a not economically successful and but I do feel a lot better than I did 3 years ago. Like, if I'd have read Mr. Heidel's comments a year and a half ago, I'd probably just like turn the stream off. So I feel a little better. So let me have a prof read. Oh, are you actually expressing that? I'll give my honest opinion. Well, I'm not going to publish it like that. Thank you. I mean, that is genuinely good advice. I think I should be read by more people before I try to put it to market, because, yeah, I mean, you're right. It's some of it just reads very self-indulgently. Like a lot of these rants, I think, are way too self-indulgent. And so, in a way, I'm using this podcast as a means to test some of these ideas out and to try to sift through to find the stuff that's actually useful in the long term. So, I think that's kind of the goal. But anyways, all that to say, human action. If we can do small little things, refine our thoughts and refine our actions to be a little more, not forward thinking, honestly, more like circumspect, I think is the word I like to say. Looking around at where we've come from and realizing we're not ready to leave that behind. Maybe we just need to stay here a while. And the two guys behind me, Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises, they exemplified that. They didn't force the issue. They took a long time, and they wrote these ideas that I'm just stumbling on so many years later. They didn't focus on the marketing. They didn't focus on all the stuff about virality or anything like that. It was a very organic, grassroots thing that's taken me my entire life to find. Okay, hey, no, that's cool. Hey, if you're harsh and you can dish it out, I'll try to receive it without being a douchebag. But I might poke back a little bit. Like, I mean, if you're going to come out to calling me a racist, like, come on, dude. I think we need a program in place to teach us to improve our mental health, as like we take physical health for granted. I think we need an integrated approach, like a psychosocial, psychophysiological. Roasted marshmallows, you asked, what is the statue behind? But I agree, yeah, we definitely need more help with that. I think it is integrated, though. I think we do need to get back a little bit more in contact with nature, too. I think it does help. Murray Rothbard's this guy right here. He was economist, Austrian economist, and behind him is Ludwig von Mises. I ran a press for Phoenix from 1994 to 2006. That's awesome. My grandfather had a history in the traditional publishing industry, and my talk today, the little essay at the beginning, was really in honor of him. Sam Harris explains that in a very clear manner. Yeah, and see, that's good. See, I think we need more of these interactions. Like, again, I don't want to see us all together and saying the same thing. Like, I want to learn from atheists, and I think Sam has done a really good job of, like, of saying, making some interesting connections, but not like compromising his position, you know. So I think it's constructive seeing people like JBP and Zizek and Sam meeting at some crossroads and learning from one another. Pegasus saying, always a fan, hang in there, Ford, it will get better. No, I feel good. I mean, I'm sorry for my rant. I feel good. Like, Ford, we can be BFF. All right, fair enough. I'll buy you a chai or some tea or coffee or drink of your choice if I'm ever in your neighborhood. I probably won't be doing much travel for the next year. Arjun says, you are always an inspiration. Long-time subscriber. Thank you, Arjun, for sticking around. Thank you, Heidel, for the constructive criticism. A little bit of shitpost trolling. I mean, I should be used to it by now. But no, I feel like we can do that because we live in at least partially free society where, you know, someone's not going to behead you for saying the wrong thing. And I would rather us talk this stuff out, and I'd rather us just compete it out in dynamic ways rather than with swords and crap. All right, I got 3% battery left. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you for the donation, anonymous cheerer earlier, and for the new subscriptions or the resubs. Godspeed to all of you. Y'all have a good month, and I will see you next week. I will be back into regular situation. Judah will be back with me. It won't be mobile like this. Do let me know. You can message me on Facebook, Surfing Violinist, or you can put a comment in here. I'll go back and check chat. There's some stuff I wanted to catch up with. That Camus video would be nice. And just let me know if like the quality of this turned out to be good. First time I've done a whole hour-long stream via the phone. Shout out to Streamlabs and to Restream.io for making this possible. It's really cool that I can read this right on my phone and not have to worry about it. So I'm really kind of curious to see how it holds up. And the podcast will be delayed this week because I'm not going to be getting home till like midnight Sunday night. So it will be a little bit late this week. Yeah, criticism should be constructive, but I mean, hey, we do live in the era of Trump. There's a lot of, I mean, Trump is just a non-stop shit poster, you know, so I should be able to take it too. I mean, he dishes it out, and I voted for him, so like, you know, like we should be able to hear it without getting our panties in a wad and being a snowflake. You're right. I agree with you on that. We need to be able to take it in stride. I do feel like I'm taking it a little better than I would have a year ago. Please, sir, can you make a reaction channel because I think you better understand Indian song and music. I do, but I just don't have the, I mean, I say I do, but I just don't have the time, and it's really hard to monetize those things anymore, just because of the copyright laws surrounding it. Thank you guys and gals for all your constructive input. Godspeed. My battery's at 2%. We'll see you next time. Keep it creative, cross-cultural, and constructive until next time.